Hi, nice to have you here. Thanks for joining. Today, I'd like to talk to you about how small things matter. Small things make big differences. And this is something that really, I think most people misunderstand. They think most people have been deceived by this idea of like the overnight success, for example, which is this very common myth in our culture. And what it really it causes an enormous amount of harm, really, because it causes people to overlook how important the small things are in favor of pursuing big things. Like people think they need big changes, uh, big successes, big things all the time. And so people are oftentimes um, pursuing these big things and overlooking the small things and not realizing that it's really the small things which lead to the big things and that this affects every area of your life. So there's no area that's untouched by this. So whether you want, if you have aspirations when it comes to finances or career or creative expression or health or relationships or spiritual growth or any area of your life, then what I'm going to talk to you about today is of great importance. And so, like many of the things that I talk about, this is not flashy. It's not sexy. It's very um, ordinary. It's the kind of thing that most people overlook because it's so ordinary, because it's not flashy, and people are seduced by those big and flashy things. The idea that you're going to uh, find that next big thing and make it big on Amazon, or that you're going to have this, you're going to bump into somebody and it's going to be all uh, like a Hollywood romance or something like that. Um, and not understanding that when you start to invest in the small things consistently, that's how you will notice the real changes because of this, um, for several reasons. One would be this compound effect, because when you make small, consistent, uh, we'll say efforts in the same direction over and over and over, day after day after day after day, then you get these compound effects, which produce over time very significant and importantly stable changes. So a lot of the time when people are pursuing big things, they uh, they miss the fact that those big instantaneous kinds of things are not stable. In order for something to be stable, it needs to be sustained. It needs to be something that is built on a solid foundation, which is happening with these small things day by day, moment by moment. That's what creates the stability. And when you want some positive change in your life, then you want it to be stable. So you could think, sometimes people say that they want to solve their financial troubles by winning the lottery. And I usually try to persuade people that that's not a good strategy for a variety of reasons. And I know that somebody will likely comment on the video on YouTube saying that I'm crazy and that winning the lottery is the only sensible thing to do, and and that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. Um, my reasoning for why I don't think that that's a good approach is because it's something that a number of reasons why. One is because like I'm saying, it just happens like that. It happens in a flash, and therefore it's not stable. And I think that the statistics on this bear that out. That people, by and large, who win the lottery, they're not able to sustain it. And also because, and this is somewhat of an aside, but also because it's not actually connected to any real value for the individual. So we often think that if I just get the money, then the money's going to solve all my problems. But actually, It's very unlikely that that would be the case, because usually it works differently than that. That the money comes as a result of the value that we are investing in our lives and in our expression. And so we will receive in equal measure to that financially. So if you're not actually investing in your values and expressing that in the world, then even if you win the lottery and you get that, flash like that, you won't sustain it. So, so that's the main point that I'd like to make today, and I will go into some more depth on it. Is that small things make big changes, and so when you focus on that, you can experience all the, really anything is possible. And this is an important point also, is that anything is possible, but not everything. And this is also, I think, why people are seduced by the idea of just these flashes of, I'll win the lottery and then I'll make it big on whatever, some America's Got Talent, and then I'll have the record deal, and then I'll publish my best-selling book, the New York Times bestseller, and all these things. It's not going to happen, because in life we have to actually be selective. We have to choose, and so this comes back down to the one of the fundamental law of creation, which I often talk about, which is the law of attention. Because attention is your fundamental power, your fundamental creative power. So everything in creation emanates from an undifferentiated source, and you are that source. So you are that undifferentiated energy or undifferentiated consciousness. And undifferentiated means that it's nothing in particular. It's everything in potential, but nothing specific. And you create through the power of your attention. So attention is always goes together with intention. So you give attention to something specific. When you give attention to something specific, that something specific is the intention. That's what gives it, it focuses the energy so that things begin to form around that which you are intending. So things start to express in creation through your attention on a particular intention. And what that means is that it's one thing at a time. So you create one thing at a time. You put your attention on one thing at a time. So you can achieve enormous things, but one thing at a time. And if you're trying to do too many things, then you will achieve very little of any of them. But if you are willing to give your full attention to one thing and sustain that, you can experience virtually unlimited growth in that one thing. So that's why I say that you can achieve anything, but not everything. What I mean by that is that you need to be selective about what is most important and then sustain your attention on that, because when you do that, you will experience tremendous growth with that thing. But by virtue of the fact that attention is focused on one thing and not everything, because creation is something specific and not non-specific, then you can only focus on that one thing and grow that one thing, not everything simultaneously. So if you want something in your life, if you want some kind of experience, if you want to learn something, if you want to discover something, whatever that might be, then you owe it to yourself to really heed what I'm saying, which is that you want to sustain your attention on that one thing. And when you do that, you will then be following this, what I'm talking about today, which is then to start to grow that by incremental progressive steps, day by day, moment by moment, with the small things. So there are some common um, expressions that most of us may be familiar with. So one of those is that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. You may have heard this proverb. And there's also that, how does this go? Rome was not built in a day. Okay, so these are both pointing to this idea that in order to accomplish something very large, very great, very substantial, it happens progressively, step by step, moment by moment, one small thing at a time. And this is what is overlooked by many people. They just want the thing without taking the steps. But here's another point is that what you really want is not the thing in and of itself. What you want is the who you have to become in order to achieve that. And in order to become that person, to achieve that which you desire, you have to take those steps. So let me try to make that clear. So sometimes people think they want wealth, but in order to have the wealth, you actually have to be wealthy. You have to be a wealthy person. People will put the cart before the horse often. They think, well, I'll be wealthy when I have the wealth. They think, I cannot be wealthy until I have the money because they think money is what makes a person wealthy. However, this is not true because, as I pointed out, there are those people who come into great amounts of money who are not wealthy and therefore they cannot hold on to it. So the person who wins the lottery and suddenly they have $343 million and then next year they're in debt by $1 million, that person was not wealthy. Whereas the person who is wealthy, they're wealthy regardless of whether they have the money or not. And invariably, if part of their expression of wealth necessitates or involves money, they will have money when that is necessary for them. And so there are plenty of examples of people who are wealthy who will periodically have or not have money. But it's important to recognize that because they are wealthy, they're able to have money even if sometimes they lose money. Even if sometimes they don't have money, they can have money again because fundamentally they are wealthy at the identity level. And so this is an important point, is that the identity is what precedes the accomplishment. So the sustained accomplishment depends upon the identity. Merely getting the accomplishment external does not necessarily mean that you have the identity. As many people will know, because many people, as I've said, there may have been a time in your life when you had something, but because you did not have the stable identity to sustain that, you were not able to sustain the accomplishment or the achievement or the thing, the external expression. So I gave the example with money. So sometimes people will have money and then they'll lose the money and they cannot regain the money because they don't have the identity as wealthy. There are people who have an expression of health and then they lose the health and they don't seem to be able to regain it because they don't have an identity of being healthy. This works for any kind of qualities. So whatever those qualities are that are necessary to have the sustained expression or outcome are a prerequisite for the sustained expression or outcome. But again, many people have the cart before the horse because they think, well, if I could just get the external thing, then I will have the identity. They think that the identity hinges upon having the external thing. They think, I'll be lovable when I have the relationship that demonstrates that to me. I will be I will be intelligent when I have the 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 degree that proves it, or I will be successful when I have the accolades that demonstrate that. I will be whatever. I will be happy when I have these external things to validate that. But that's incorrect. That's the wrong order of things. The correct sequence is first establish the identity, and then you will have necessarily the expression of that. And so in order to have the identity, that is established in with these small steps. So I'll hopefully make that clear. So think about some uh, quality that you value and that you also would identify with yourself. So it could be, intelligent, loving, kind, generous, curious, persistent, um, anything of that sort that you value and that you identify with yourself. And then notice how you know that. I mean, you could do this with something you don't like about yourself, and the same thing would also apply, but it'll be nicer for all of us, more pleasant if we focus on something we do like about ourselves. So just notice that in order to have that identity, so you identify as that quality, in order to have that identity, you have lots of examples of that in your life, right? So if you say I'm an intelligent person, as long as you're not completely delusional, it's because you have lots of examples from your experience to draw upon that to you demonstrate that you are intelligent. Now, other people might agree or disagree. That's neither here nor there. But for you, those examples demonstrate that you are that quality. And the stronger the quality, the more of those examples you have. So if you said I'm an intelligent person, and I said, well, how do you know that? And you said, well, because once I got a good grade on a test. When I was in kindergarten, I got a gold star once. I said, oh, really? You have any other examples? And he said, no, that's it. Well, guess what? I could guarantee that the next thing that happens in your life that calls into question whether you are intelligent or not, you will fling to the opposite extreme. You'll say, you are not intelligent at all. Because in order for it to be stable and secure, you have to have lots and lots and lots of examples. So any quality that you identify with, you have lots of examples. And the stronger you identify with it, the more examples you have. So how did you get those examples? Was it that, if you say that you're intelligent, when you were, you know, when you were in kindergarten, assuming when you were that age, when you were 5 years old, did you publish your doctorate thesis? No, of course not. That would be absurd. So your examples, but certainly if you strongly identify as intelligent, then you have examples of being intelligent when you were 5 years old, when you were 15 years old, when you were 5 months old. You have examples throughout your whole life continuously, more or less. There could be reasons why you would have gaps, but even then you can find examples if you know how to look. And kindness would be a great one. Yeah. So if you say that you are a kind person, then you have examples of being kind throughout your whole life. And again, because of the way you structure it, it's possible that you might have some gaps, but you could still find examples in those gaps. So were you kind or intelligent or generous or whatever the quality is, were you expressing that in the same way or to the same magnitude when you were 5 months old as you do today? Of course not. That would be totally unrealistic, and we would not expect that of ourselves, right? If you can be generous today, you could be generous in much, let's say, bigger magnitude and bigger expression than you were able to when you were 5 years old. Not that it was any less important or meaningful when you were 5 years old, but it's just that the expression of it could be much greater today because you have much more capacity and skills and all kinds of things. So now, in order for that to happen, in order for you to establish that quality for yourself very strongly, the point is you have many examples, and those examples have many of them have been small. Not all, of course, but many of them have been small. In fact, if you really start to take a look, you'll see that you have actually countless examples because you'll start to see that you have so many small examples. And you might do this little experiment. And what if you were to just imagine what it would be like if all you had were just the big examples? Just imagine for a moment that you could somehow cloak all of the little examples. And all you have are just the big examples, just the huge examples of you being that quality. The peak experiences where you say, I was so generous, I was so intelligent, I was so kind, I was so compassionate, I was so whatever. What if you were momentarily to ignore all of the little examples and just notice how, what effect does that have on your sense of being that quality? It will weaken it because all of the small examples count a great deal. The small examples add up to something really huge. So the small things make a huge difference. Without the small things, the big things are not possible. You could not actually have the identity. And if you did not have the identity, then you could not achieve or at least not sustain the achievements externally. So think about it. And this is a big problem for a lot of people who will struggle in relationships because they'll say, well, I don't know why I struggle in relationships. You know, I'm so kind and considerate and I'm loving, right? And it's like, well, great, you got a lot going for you. But a lot of people will excuse themselves from having an identity as being lovable. And guess what? It doesn't work very well in relationships if you're not lovable, right? If you do not identify as being lovable, then that becomes it becomes very one-sided. Because to be lovable is to receive love. To be loving is to extend love. To be lovable is to receive love. And if you're only willing to give but not to receive, it doesn't work. And so uh, to um, discover that the small things make a big difference can make all the difference in your life because you can start to actually make changes by taking small steps. So if you say, well, I'm not something, so think of some quality that you think that you're not, that you would like to be. So if you say you're not intelligent or you're not lovable or you're not loving or you're not kind or you're not strong or whatever qualities you would like to uh, to identify with so that you can have the outer expression. If you say you're not wealthy, not abundant, then you would want to actually start to develop that identity. And in order to develop that identity, um, if you say you're not that thing, and then you want to just overnight become that thing in a big way, you're how are you going to do that? Just think about that for a moment. So if there's some quality that you think you're not that quality, or you're not strongly that quality, but you can see how it would be very helpful for you to identify strongly with that quality. Now imagine try and imagine how you're going to get to that overnight, how you're going to, in some very big way, you're going to just, flip a switch and you're going to be that. And chances are you don't know how to do that because it's too big. You're trying to bite off more than you can chew. But you can build it with lots of little experiences, lots of little examples. And so this is where then now this is where time often comes into the picture. And I'm going to talk about a way that you can intelligently work with time so that um, you can achieve better results faster. But first, before I get to that, I'm going to also talk about just time in the way we normally relate to time. So oftentimes people are reluctant to take the small steps because they say, well, but look at me. It's too late in the game. I don't have enough time to wait and just take the small steps. I'm too old now and too much time has gone by, too much water under the bridge. I can't afford to take small steps. I need to take big, risky actions so that I can achieve dramatic things overnight because it's the only way that I can succeed. I'm too old now to achieve wealth through small steps. I have to win the lottery. And so this is a big mistake because, of course, it doesn't work. And this kind of thinking is the reason why you're in position that you're in now, right? So there's another proverb that I'll mention, which is when is the best time? The best time to have planted a tree was 40 years ago, and the second best time is now. So this idea of, well, it's too late for me because I can't do it the small way. I have to do it in some big, grandiose, dramatic way because it's too late. So again, the best time to plant a tree was 40 years ago. We can all probably agree with that. But that's just half of the picture. The second best time is now. So if you take a look and see how you've been doing things, how you've been thinking about things, you'll probably see that you've still, for the last 40 years, the last 70 years, the last 20 years, or however long it's been, you've been actually taking that same approach of thinking, I don't have time. I need to get rich quick. I need to be an overnight success now. I need to have the romance of my life, of my dreams now. Can't wait. Can't take the small steps. It's too hard. It's too uncomfortable. It's not enough. It's not big enough. Not fast enough. Not dramatic enough. And because of that kind of thinking, that's why you're in the position you're in now. And if you continue along that same path, then 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you'll be in the same position still. And the same thing will be true then that's true now, which is that the best time to plant a tree was 40 years ago. The second best time is now. So now is always the second best time. And since you cannot, well, I'll get to how you can plant it 40 years ago, but by conventional wisdom, you cannot go and plant it 40 years ago. So let's at least start with the second best time, which is now. So this is how a lot of self-help starts here. Okay, so a lot of self-help will focus on and it is okay, start now, and they will intelligently point out what I'm pointing out, which is take the small steps now, and 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 take advantage of the compound benefits of consistently taking the small steps. So what do I mean? So instead of thinking about how am I going to get that huge thing that I want? How am I going to get that huge accomplishment, the huge attainment? What is something that I could do consistently starting now that is in alignment with that? So this is, let's take, for example, if you have a desire to have, let's say, improvements in your interpersonal relationships, what is something that you could do consistently starting now? And I will propose something to you. This is not the only thing, but it's one thing that I know is very powerful, and I highly recommend it. Practice forgiveness. If you start practicing forgiveness now, then you will, and you do that consistently every day, you will start to notice over time very significant improvements in your interpersonal relationships of all kinds. But if you're just waiting, you're saying, well, that's not big enough. That's not fancy enough. It's not flashy enough. It's not giving me the overnight success that I think I should have or that I need in order to be okay. Then you'll keep putting it off. And then remember, again, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you'll still be in the same position, and you'll justify the same kind of attitude because you say, well, but I can't wait. I have to have the big success. I can't take small steps now. But the best time to have planted the tree was 40 years ago. The second best time is now. And the thing is, now is 40 years ago from 40 years from now, right? So if you wait 40 years from now, before you finally say, okay, now I'm willing to be humble and just start to take the small steps consistently, then you'll be in the same position, but you could actually take the action now and plant the tree 40 years ago now. Because again, this is 40 years ago from 40 years from now. So if you take the action now, you're planting the tree 40 years ago from 40 years from today. So if you want improvements in your interpersonal relationships, if you want to have the romance of your dreams, whatever it is you want, that in terms of your relationships, interpersonal relationships, one very simple yet very powerful thing that you could do consistently every day starting today would be to practice forgiveness. And then people will say, oh, but I don't know how. Well, yes, because you haven't been practicing. You see? Like, so if you say, well, I don't know how and therefore I can't, then you never will. Imagine if you said, if somebody said, well, it would be it will be helpful for you to learn to read. And you say, well, but I can't. I've looked at the page of this mumbo jumbo and I can't make heads or tails of it. So I just can't do it. If that was your attitude and you just continued with that attitude, would you read today? No, you would not, because you would have just insisted that you cannot. So we all start from a position of not knowing how. That's always the case when we're learning. We're always starting from not knowing how. If you knew how, then you wouldn't need to learn, right? I mean, that kind of, I'm laughing because it's so obvious once you realize it, right? Like if you already knew how, you would not need to learn. The fact that you don't know how just indicates that you need to learn the if you want the benefit. So so with anything that you don't yet know how to do, it can be useful to just start to question your thinking and your attitudes about it and realize that uh, if it's something that is possible for anybody, it's likely possible for you. So it's not that you can't, it's just that you have not yet done it, right? It's not that I can't forgive or I don't know how, that I'm incapable of forgiveness or that forgiveness is too hard or any of those things. It's just I have not yet gained mastery over this skill of forgiveness. But other people are able to do it, therefore I can as well. And how will I achieve that? By taking consistent steps, consistent small steps. So I could just start with, I mean, first of all, you could read some books, you could watch some YouTube videos. I mean, maybe that's useful. However, you still have to put it into practice. And so this is another mistake that people make is they say, well, if I'll just get enough information, that will do this for me. But imagine somebody telling you how, you say, well, I'd really like to know what it's like to eat an orange, but I don't know what it is to eat an orange. I've never eaten an orange, so I don't know what that is. And so I'm going to go ask a bunch of people. I'm going to read some books about the experience of eating an orange. You could do that, but you could also just eat the orange. So the experience always is superior to just getting information. But in some cases, getting some information can be useful. Not with eating an orange, obviously, just eating the orange is probably useful. But when it comes to something like forgiveness, if you just say, gee, I genuinely have no clue where even to begin. Okay, getting some basic tips on how to start could be useful, but still just start taking the small steps. Once you have a basic starting point, start taking the steps, because if you don't, then you're fooling yourself. Because the real benefits come from consistently taking the small steps. So with this example of forgiveness, how might you do that? Well, just notice the burden of not forgiving. Notice how much effort goes into not forgiving. The resentment, the grievances, all of that you just keep going over and over and over, holding on to. Notice how much effort goes into that. Notice how exhausting that is. Notice how painful that is. And then invite yourself to notice, might there be a possibility of something other than that? And what might that be like? Could you, for one moment, allow yourself to consciously let go, right? Could you just say, okay, I acknowledge that I have all of these grievances and all of these reasons why I believe that I should not and cannot forgive. However, even though I have all of those reasons, I'm willing just for one moment, just at least as an experiment, to find out what might it be like if I consciously choose to let go, just for one instant. And just allow yourself that, just for one instant, allow yourself to let go. And if you say, I don't know how to let go, well, what if you did? So I understand you might say, I don't know. Fine, maybe you don't know. But what if you did know? What might you do? How might you explore that if you did know? Or if somebody did know? If you knew somebody who knew, what might they do to let go? So you can just start to try on these possibilities and it will open you up so that you can start to have some kind of experience. And it might not be a big experience. It might be a big experience, but more likely it will be a small experience. And if it is a big experience, then more likely than not, the next time you do it, it won't be a big experience, because most of the time they're small experiences. So if you think, in order to forgive, I have to have some kind of huge heart opening, and the clouds have to part, and there has to be angels choirs, and I have to just feel like, all my sins have been washed away, hallelujah. Boy, you're going to be holding out for a long time. But what if you could just give yourself permission to just explore this possibility of, even though I have these grievances, even though I have all of these hurts, I choose in this moment just to explore the possibility of letting go just for one instant. And just notice what that's like, just for one instant. Can you just notice something, anything? And if you repeat that over and over and over and over, not a million times today, but what if you repeated it a million times over the next 10 years? Can you see how that might give you a big shift in your life? But if you're trying to get the big shift today, because you think, I have to get to the angels choir and the heavens parting and the huge heart opening and all that today, then you're very unlikely to ever achieve that. But if you take small, consistent steps, then 10 years from now, you might actually be able to have that experience consistently. But because you got there slowly, step by step. So with all of the things that we want to achieve, we can achieve those things starting from where we are, moving forward by taking simple, small, consistent steps. So so that's an example with interpersonal relationships. And somebody gave the example of gratitude. Absolutely, yeah. So you could start to practice gratitude. There's plenty of evidence that consistently practicing gratitude has many benefits. So you could consistently choose to practice that. There's so many possibilities, right? And with the gratitude, same kind of thing. So you might say, well, but I'm not good at it. I don't know how to experience gratitude. The only way that it's true is if I feel this huge heart opening and I feel so grateful and I'm overwhelmed by it and I'm crying and have this massive healing experience. That's the only true experience of gratitude. Well, then you're never going to get there, because you're not willing to take the small, consistent steps to achieve that. What if instead you just said, okay, starting where I am, can I experience any kind of gratitude, even just a small amount of gratitude? And you might say, just what's one thing that I'm grateful for right now? You can say, well, I'm grateful that I'm breathing. And you might say, and another part of you might say, well, that's stupid. That's not enough. And I think I'm faking it anyway. I'm not really that grateful. Okay, but at least you took a step. And if you're willing to just allow yourself that, then maybe after a couple of days or a couple of weeks, you might actually start to genuinely feel something. You might be like, wow, actually, I kind of am grateful for that. And by the way, I'm also kind of grateful for this other thing. But you won't get there if you don't take the steps consistently. And if you're not willing to start where you are, if you're not willing to cut yourself a break. So taking the simple, small steps consistently is what gives the results. This is true of all things, including wealth, right? So if you want to establish an identity of being wealthy, if you continue to practice the same things that are producing the opposite of that, then you're not going to establish that identity. But what are some simple, small things that you could start to practice today? And it could be so many things. It could be like, I'm choosing to create a savings account, and there might be a part of your brain that says, yeah, but that's stupid, and the interest rate is below inflation, and so it's not really, it's not really an intelligent move. Fine, okay, but guess what? If you started to save $1 a week, then you'd have $52 at the end of the year that you would otherwise not have had. And you might say, well, $52, what is that? Okay, but it's $52. It's something. And you could build upon that. But if you're not willing to do that much, why do you believe you're going to do something greater than that? If you're not willing to save $1 a week, why do you believe you're ever going to have $1 million? It's insane. So taking the simple, small, consistent steps is what gives the big results. And in fact, that's the secret that those who have great success, great sustained success know, whether consciously or unconsciously. And everybody else is continuing to suffer in ignorance. And they're looking around and telling one another that you'll be the overnight success one day. Just keep your fingers crossed. Just keep buying the lottery tickets. And that's not the way. So now I've suggested that you can take simple, small, consistent steps starting today. Oh, let me tell you something else about this. So I've emphasized simple, small, consistent steps. So what I'm really talking about is habits. So your identity is based on habits. So I've already pointed this out in another way when I said, if you think about your identity consists of these qualities that you identify with or as, and that you establish those qualities strongly by having many, 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 many countless examples of being or expressing that quality. So how is that? Well, notice that they are consistent. So if you said, well, I was intelligent, you know, once when I was 5 and once when I was 10, and there was a time when I was 15, and that was a big example of being intelligent. And then when I was 23, I was intelligent once, and you see, you got like 10 examples of being intelligent, and some of them are really big examples. But it's not going to be a very strong foundation of being intelligent. So one experience comes along that you say, boy, that's not intelligent at all, and it just knocks all the others down. It's flimsy. So you need this stable base, a stable foundation, in order for that identity to be strong and to be resilient. Because there will be things that happen in our lives that will call into question things. I mean, just because you're wealthy, that does not mean that every single thing that you do is going to, give you huge amounts of financial returns. You might still make a stupid investment. It might still happen. But if you have that stable foundation, you have resilience. So resilience actually means to spring back. You can literally spring back from these things because you're like, yeah, okay, I can learn from that. I made a mistake. I can learn from that. Versus if you don't have that resilience and that stability, then that thing happens and it's just catastrophic and you don't learn anything because you can't even bear to look at it. It's like, oh, that's devastating. It was the worst thing that ever happened. You can't look at it. You can't learn from it. So having this stable foundation depends upon having a consistent foundation of that thing. And that comes through habit. It's really saying the same thing. So habit is the foundation of your identity. Your identity depends upon those things which you do consistently. So if you consistently practice forgiveness, you become a forgiving person. You become a forgiving person through practicing forgiveness consistently so that it becomes a habit. Now, at first, when you're first starting out wanting to establish a habit, it's usually by virtue of the fact that it's not already a habit, there's going to be some resistance because your nervous system wants to conserve energy by continuing to do exactly what it's always done. It doesn't matter whether what you've always done is giving you good results or not. It's just the habit. And so it conserves energy, at least in the short term, to just keep doing the same thing. So your nervous system says, just keep doing the same thing. Resist any change. So this is why when you try to make a big change, you have big resistance. If you say, I'm setting my New Year's resolution, I've been, I haven't gotten up off the couch for the last year, but on January 1st, starting January 1st, I'm going to run a marathon every single day. No, you won't. It won't happen. But if you said, because why? It's too much resistance. You will not do that. But what could you do? Could you say, well, for the last year, I have not gotten up off the couch. So starting January 1st, I'm going to actually stand up and walk 5 steps. Could you do that? And then you say, and from now on, every single day, I'm going to walk at least 5 steps. Could you do that? Yes, you could. Because the resistance is low enough. You're motivated because you have a vision. You say, this is something I want. I want to be healthy. This is an action that I can take that will help me to be healthy. this will help to establish the identity of being healthy. So you start taking the steps consistently, but they have to be small. They have to be so this is coming back to the four qualities of to establish a habit that James Clear identified. So the first one is that it has to be obvious. Second is it has to be attractive. Third is it has to be easy, and the fourth is it has to be rewarding. So as best as possible, you want to make any new thing that you want to establish conform to those four things. If not, at least as many of them as you can. So if you're going to say, I have to run a marathon, I will run a marathon every single day starting January 1st, you won't, because it's too big. So it's not easy, not particularly attractive. And it's probably not even going to be that rewarding at first. You're just going to feel terrible. So, but could you take 5 steps every day? Yeah, you could. The resistance to that is going to be too small. You can overcome that because you'll say, hey, you give yourself a reward for doing it. So you want to set up small, simple things that you can, habits that you can establish. So this is why, no mistake, I advocate for establishing good habits. So that's why I do advocate for practicing forgiveness. It's a simple thing that you can do every day, and it will greatly enhance your quality of life on so many levels. So you could just choose, how long does that take? Not long at all. You look, try it out. It's going to take you 5 seconds. Think of something or someone, including yourself, or some situation where you have some kind of where you're holding on. You're still holding on in a negative way. And just notice how painful that is for you. And just admit that it's painful and that you want something different, that you'd like to experience forgiveness. You'd like to at least experiment with the possibility of what forgiveness might give you, and just choose to let go. And if you don't know how to let go, just ask yourself, how might it be if I did know how to let go? That's it. See how easy that was? Didn't take you but 5-10 seconds. And now you might say, oh, but I didn't notice anything. It didn't change anything. Okay. But what if you did that every day? What if you did that twice every day? What if you did that first thing in the morning and last thing at night every day? I promise you, your life would change. And so just establishing a simple habit like that will change your life over time. So that's how you can work with time in the conventional sense, where we say, I can only work with time moving forward. Okay, so hopefully I've established why that's useful and important. Now let's also address how you can actually work with time in a different way, where you can actually work with the past. So remember that I've said that in order to achieve the thing externally, to achieve the outcome that you want, you have to first establish the identity, at least if you want to sustain it. So maybe you could get lucky. Luck does play a role. You might get lucky and get certain things, but you will not be able to sustain them unless you have the identity. And the identity does not come merely by having luck. So if you want to be a loving person, a lovable person, a forgiving person, a generous person, an intelligent person, a compassionate person, and a creative person, a strong person, whatever kind of person you want to be, whatever those qualities are, then that you have to establish those strongly. And remember that I said you could do that moving forward, and I would certainly encourage you to do that. So form those simple habits that are in alignment with that, so that you commit to those every day from now on. And then you can achieve and establish that identity, and then you can sustain the desired outcomes. And I'm now going to propose to you that you can also work backward in time and help yourself out. So if you think about, if you want to establish an identity of being wealthy, but presently you don't identify as being wealthy. So you can begin to, moving forward, starting today, you can establish those simple habits, and you can grow those over time. Start small, one thing at a time, and then over time, once one habit becomes established, you can add on to that. You can keep adding more simple, small habits that will continue to grow that identity. You can do that, and I encourage that. And think about this. Is it easier to establish those habits of being wealthy if you already identify as wealthy or if you don't? And the obvious answer to that is it's much easier to establish new habits that are in alignment with being wealthy if you already identify as wealthy. Same if you want to establish habits of being healthy, it's much easier to do so if you already have an identity as being healthy. On and on, right? So if you already identify as something, it's much easier to establish new habits that will continue to grow that identity. So how could we do that? And the answer to that is in what I've already told you. So remember that I pointed out that in order to identify as something, you already have to have examples of that. Now, for many of the qualities that you would like to identify more strongly with, you already have some examples. You might not have a lot of examples, and you might have a lot of counterexamples, but you have some examples. So for most of the qualities, not all, but let's say that I'll use healthy. Okay, so if you desire to more strongly identify as being healthy because you want to have sustained health outcomes, then you might say, let's say on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the most healthy that you could possibly be, how healthy would you say you are? You might say 2. Okay, well, what that means is you have some examples of being healthy. You don't completely disidentify with being healthy. You have some examples. It's just that you don't have a lot of examples, and you probably have a lot of examples of where you would consider yourself not to be healthy. But you have at least some examples. So that would be one scenario. Another scenario would be you would just say, I have no examples at all. I have no examples of being that quality at all. I have no examples of ever being healthy or ever being intelligent or ever being loving or ever being lovable. Well, in that case, in either case, you can work with it in the same way. You just, first of all, you'd want to find out, do you have any resistance to having some examples of being that quality? Because if you have resistance, then you'll block yourself from finding examples. So if you have resistance, then what you can do is you can talk to that part of yourself that has the resistance and ask that part what its positive intention for you is with that resistance. And then you can find out what the ultimate aim of that positive intention is. And that ultimate aim, usually the intention is to protect you in some way. And then if you keep inquiring, that part will usually reveal to you that its ultimate aim with that is really to achieve love or happiness or joy or peace or fulfillment or something. Okay. So you ask that part then, are you willing to consider ways to achieve that intention that are also compatible with having examples of being this quality? Okay. So let's say I would like to be lovable, but I have resistance to identifying as lovable. So I could ask that part, what is your positive intention for me in the resistance to being lovable? And the part might say, well, to protect you from disappointment. Okay, and when I'm protected from disappointment, what's important about that? And it might say, well, then you can know peace. And I say, okay, great. So are you willing to consider ways that I could achieve peace that are also compatible with being lovable? Usually the part will say, yeah, sure. I don't know how that's going to work, but I'm at least open to it. So this will remove the resistance. Now, as soon as you remove the resistance, what will start to happen is you'll start to realize, you ask yourself, do I have any examples, or can I find more examples of me being this quality in my life? And if you don't have resistance and you're sincerely willing to look, and you're willing to look for the small examples, you'll start to see that you have many examples of being that quality. So if I say, I would like to be lovable, I don't presently identify as being very lovable, I've removed the resistance. Now I start to look, do I have any examples of being lovable? Now this also requires that you actually start to get clear on what it means to you to be lovable. A lot of the time we just don't know. We haven't really gotten clarity for ourselves. But in order to be a quality the quality is something intrinsic to us. It's not something that depends on external conditions or circumstances. So to be lovable does not depend upon what other people think of me. It does not depend upon whether it doesn't depend on anything external. What it depends upon is something intrinsic to me. It's an intrinsic quality. So I need to look and find out, what does that actually mean for me? What does it actually mean to be lovable as an intrinsic quality? Once I start to have some clarity about that, I can look and find examples in my life of when I've been that. And the more examples I'm willing to find, even those really, really small examples, and the more continuous I can find, of the more continuity of examples I can find throughout my whole life, suddenly it starts to become stronger. Now, this is not about delusion. This is not about trying to invent being lovable when I have not been. But the truth is, we've all been all of the we've all been all of the qualities that we value. We just have not been looking at them in the right way. So when we're willing to look at them in the right way, we can start to find that we have been those qualities. Perhaps we have not expressed them as fully as we might, but when we're willing to start to see that we do actually have examples of being those qualities, this will start to strengthen that foundation. So it's not about delusion. It's not that I suddenly say, oh, I'm the most lovable person, and therefore, I snap my fingers and everybody adores me. People are coming to knocking down my door because they want to give me so much love. It's not like that. It's just that I start to realize that fundamentally, I am lovable. And this starts to create a foundation from which I can begin to establish more of those habits that more easily, that will greatly more enhance that quality within myself. So this works with all the qualities, including, let's say, wealth or being wealthy. So if you think that being wealthy depends upon having money, and then you look through your life and say, well, I've never really had much money, therefore I'm not wealthy, then you're setting it up for yourself in a really difficult way. But if you start to realize that being wealthy is actually something intrinsic, it's a quality that does not depend upon anything external. It does not depend upon having money. Being able to sustain having money depends upon being wealthy, but being wealthy does not depend upon having money. So when you start to look for yourself and discover, what does it actually mean for you to be wealthy as an intrinsic quality, and then you start to find those examples for yourself of when you have been wealthy in your life, it will create a more stable, solid foundation, and that will make it much easier to begin to establish those habits that will enhance that in your life. Because it's much easier to behave consistent with being wealthy when you already know yourself to be wealthy. Versus if you say, I'm not wealthy, but one day I might be wealthy when I have enough money, then it's much more difficult to establish the habits. Not impossible, but just much more challenging. So what I'm proposing here is that you can achieve amazing things when you put into practice what I've just described. And I've given you an enormous amount of information, and I don't necessarily expect that everybody's going to be able to understand all of that straight away, because it's a lot of information. What I've given you, it represents decades of work and learning and experience on my part. But I have given you something really precious, so that if you actually start to work with that, you'll start to see positive results in your life. So again, just to summarize, you let's take it a step at a time. So in order to have what you want, you need to first establish the identity that will allow you to have that. And that identity depends upon experiences. And specifically, we're talking about habits. So in order to establish habits, you need to start small and grow that. And it needs to be small, simple, and consistent. And you can start today moving forward by establishing those very small, simple things that you can do that are consistent with and congruent with those qualities that you want, that will allow you to have what you want. And you can create a foundation for yourself that will make that even easier if you work from the past forward by establishing that identity for yourself now, where you say, what is this quality that I want? And let me discover how I've always been that quality. Again, this is not about being delusional. It's not to say that it's not saying, well, I've always had $1 million. I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I've always been these things. It's not that. It's to recognize that that quality, which is actually intrinsic to you, is something that has always been there for you. And you can discover those experiences, those examples from your life that confirm that that is true when you're willing to do so. If you have resistance to that, then you need to release that resistance first. And I've given you a simple process for doing that, which is to talk within yourself to that part of you that has that resistance, discover what its positive intention is, and then negotiate with that part to find a way to achieve that ultimate aim of its positive intention in a way that's congruent with also establishing that identity for yourself, the identity of the quality that you want to establish. And ultimately, it's always compatible because that part wants, it always ultimately wants something like love, peace, harmony, joy, abundance, freedom, connection. And those values will always ultimately be compatible with those qualities that you want to establish for yourself. Okay, so if you want wealth and you want to therefore establish for yourself an identity of being wealthy, then being wealthy is compatible with love. It's compatible with peace. It's compatible with generosity. It's compatible with all of the values that this part or parts of you might hold. If you want to establish a quality of patience or endurance or whatever those qualities might be, those are ultimately compatible with those high level values that the parts of you hold. So the resistance will release when you negotiate those things. So that's the overview. Again, it's an enormous amount of information. If you have questions about that, then for those who are here live, you're in the right place because we can address those in the group coaching. So if you have those questions, just bring them up. For those who are who will watch this on YouTube, then I just want to make a few mentions before we wrap up this part of the session. So for those watching on YouTube, if you are interested in joining these meetings live, you're welcome to do so. And one benefit of that is that you are then able to join the group coaching sessions that follow these. So if you have questions or you wanted to get coached on something, you're welcome to do that when you join live. And you can get that information to join live by joining my newsletter at my website at joylot.com. Also, when you do that, you will get the ebook, which is the five fundamental laws of creation, which is really, really helpful to set a foundation so that you can understand how this experience is structured. It covers, among other things, the law of attention, which I talked about today. And if you are interested in receiving my support in a very structured way over 9 weeks to help you to achieve your goals and establish those qualities and identities that will help you to sustain that in your life, you may be interested in the Manifesting Truth program. It is a truly unique program that will help you in all ways and all levels of your life to achieve your goals physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And you can get more information about that at joylot.com/manifesting-truth. And I'll leave links in the description below on YouTube. And so for those watching on YouTube, I'm going to sign off now. Blessings to you and bye for now.